had a bad feeling about him. He came highly recommended years and years and years ago, back in 2021. He voted for Evan. Fuck, the ass. Good. And all their van, Ron, every, you know, and maybe they just want to feel left out. You know, maybe they just want a career. So we talked solutions. Well, he was nice. He's communicated to so consent. Like, we're going to support transitioning kids if they have parental consent. And I just tweeted it. So, like, you know, I don't know. Did you miss that? Maybe you weren't paying attention. Maybe your attention was elsewhere. Maybe someone who was jingling keys in front of your face like a baby. And you were like, someone's jingling something shiny in front of me. Like, and it went right over your head. It just went right under the radar. Pick your metaphor. But that's what happened. They said all of that about the deportations, about the trannies, about the tax cuts, about the anti-Semitism online and on the campuses. All of that was telegraphed well in advance. You just didn't want to hear it. And if you heard it, you didn't want to believe it. And if you believed it, you just didn't want to say it. And if you said it, you didn't want to pay the price for saying it. You didn't want to get fired or
was murdered
ostracized because everybody wanted to kiss Trump's ass to get a job in the admin. Everybody wants to kiss Trump's ass to get money from Gavin Wax. Everybody wants to kiss Trump's ass because they want to be dealt into the game. And so who's the only person that can afford to not do that? The guy that's outside. You have to have your own cult of personality. You have to have your own fiefdom. You have to have your own independent base of power. Otherwise, you're at the mercy of the king of the hill. So, no, I never thought it would go this far, but I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised either.
John Nardi sent $20. Which hard mode boss do you typically face in the jungle after defeating the 3 mechanical bosses?
I don't know what that
Stetson
is.
Grow, I sent $25. Went to see Fishbag at UF today. Grew completely full. Gave me a lot of hope about the future of his campaign in AF as well.
Yeah, me too. I saw that and it felt very good. That's one bright spot in all of this misery. Because Fishback is really articulate, very solid, very smart. He's running a great campaign. And what I love is the momentum, the energy. You go to these Waffle House, Denny's, IHOP, and there's people there. There's actually lots of people, young people, and they're excited to be there. And that's the future. That is the future. Wherever the young, energetic, excited people are, that's where the future is. That's where the arrow is pointing. So that makes me feel very good. And I'm very pleased about that. He's getting attention. He's getting a lot of support. He's got momentum. He's got the youth. You see normal, good-looking, young people, and they're eager to be there. They're in a line all the way around the restaurant, and all they want to do is take a picture, and they recognize them, and it's a beautiful thing. It gives me hope. And that's the hope, is that there are other people like you out there, you know? Maybe we'll do another event this year because we need to just deliver a message that we are not alone. We need a demonstration of strength. You know? It's not just as big as me bitching on the show. It's not just as big as you at the water cooler or whatever. You know, it's a whole movement.
Noah Clark sent $20. My mom watches Candace Owens, but today she saw me wearing my AF hat and asked me to get her one. Prayers answered Lamau.
Hey, let's go. Love to hear it.
Great Professor Jank sent $20. The UCD Iranian missile sang in Momoia victims of Epstein Island. Holy Jesus, kill all going, please Jesus.
Dude, so true. So true. This missile says for the victims of Epstein Island based. America attacked Iran because they burned the statue of Moloch. They burned the statue of Bao. Yeah, okay. Very good. Okay, little brown clown. Very good. Yeah, that's just the most retarded shit imaginable. It actually hurts me. It's actually physically painful to see that. Did you see Iran just signed a missile for the victims of Epstein Island? Okay, yeah, that's great. They signed the missile. This one's for the Khazarian Mafia. This one's for Jacob
Right,
Frank.
sent $20. Just got my 5 quarter zips for the groom and his groomsmen for his wedding this Friday. Going to be looking fresh as Jeff.
For a wedding? Come on. I think you gotta go with the tux for a
Everyone sent
wedding.
$50. My husband was thrilled enough. Trump is Manchurian Canada. They can trade this country for Israel. Fuck the GOP. They must lose.
Yep.
Voting for the first time in his life. Pray the rosary. America
Hell
first.
yeah. Yes, dude. Yes. We need more people. It's blue. It's blue, bitch. Because we're voting Democrat. 2026, we're all voting Democrat. I can't do it.
intern. Where are you gonna intern? I'm a JP Morgan investment banker.
Everyone's going to do
G36
it.
Public Roy percent $30.
In fact.
Calling JD Vance fat has made me want to lose 17 pounds this year. Going in ascension.
I'm really hungry. What
You should. You should. Everybody should be. There's no excuse to be fat. We have Reddit True Tide now. There's no excuse to be fat. I don't want to be fat.
Senata sent $20. Not trying to judge your faith. My faith political commentator, by far. Your faith is part of the reason I'm here. Much love.
Great. Love to hear it.
M4DT sent $21. Good evening, Nick. Favorite racial slur? 67 Wang 67 sent $50. Hey, Nick. I'm thinking of running for Supreme Emperor in the Big 14 AK. Here's my policy. Kill all minorities. What do you think?
Disavow.
Greg Hummons
Well, look
sent
at his
$20.
dad.
Free Hitler.
We're minorities,
stupid.
dumbass. Who do you think the minority?
You turn yourself into a clown.
Greg Hummons sent $20.
Stupid.
Free Hitler miss you.
Chicks.
Playful face
He
emoji.
made-
High voltage sign emoji.
Seems he's
High
gotten
voltage
some-
Free
emoji. Israeli
Hitler.
emoji.
So
Face
desperate.
emoji.
Free
How's the
Hitler
fasting
so
going?
active.
Lady Vegas sent $25. What a superbly featured room and what excellent boiled potatoes. Many years since I've had such an exemplary vegetable.
I don't know that.
That's William.
And then, like-
I'm 27 years old. I'm
From
no prospect.
Misfits.
I'm already a burden
Well,
to my
somebody.
parents, and I'm
So I
frightened.
got a call yesterday from
Time to
Misfits.
get married.
Well,
Time
somebody
to
who
get
knows
married,
somebody
lady.
at Misfits. It was
Thank
like
you
a
for the
liaison.
super
And they
chat. Oh,
called
another one.
That's
and
William
they
Darcy
said,
said $100.
we
I
want
was
you to
told,
fight
"You have bewitched my
for
body and soul,
$500,000.
and I love my love, I love
We
you.
want you to
I never
box
wish to be
somebody
parted from you from this day.
for $500,000.
Rapes Nico.
I don't think that's enough money.
Thanks for the big super chat.
Mr. Bingley sent
Appreciate it.
$25. I'm black now.
Oh, great.
F01264 sent $20. You are a Fed. You want us to vote against the GOP when we should be trusting in the current MAGA movement.
Really? Think
Yahoo
so?
Ubelson Rumpsjaw sent $20. What up, King?
What up?
Yahoo Ubelson Rumpsjaw
How you
sent
doing?
$20. Also yesterday I was talking about the dumb Juj Clang. He apparently likes to groom kids, bro.
I know, but there's bad things about him too, okay? I know he may seem based. That's the whole point. That's the whole point. He's trying to make us like him. Hello. I'm trying to say that actually he's bad, okay? I know you may think he's a cool guy. That's his intention. He's trying to seem likable. I get that. You don't need to remind me of that. But actually, he's not what he really says he is. He's actually a bad guy. Okay? I need you to understand that. I don't think you're hearing
Hey, on
me.
Twist sent $20. Why don't you like when Tucker talks about demons?
Because I don't think it's sincere. And, it just sounds wacky. Sounds a little wacky.
Rusty Screw sent $50. Vote Kevin Ryan for Illinois Senator. Winnebago County vote Petrocelli for clerk. Much love from Rockford.
Thank
Blaine
you.
Grow Iperstein sent $20. Me mom died in a Toronto oil depot. Huckleberry 999 sent $20. Jesus Christ and man who are willing to fight for righteousness are the only way out of this.
Wow. That's
Woodley
so
Woodley sent
true.
$20. What did you think of Tucker's claim last week that a couple Gulf states arrested Mossad operatives trying to do a false flag and that hasn't been reported yet?
Well, if that's true, then we all really need to know that. I love when he drops things like that, like, and I know that for a fact. It's like, can you, like, that's actually very relevant. You want to clue us in on that, maybe? Can we maybe get that information? Tucker always has, like, government sources feeding him information where he's like, I happen to know that for a fact. And it's like, really? How do you know that? That's actually really fucking disturbing. You know that? Why? You do a podcast. How do you, a podcaster, so you're talking to every royal family in the Gulf? Yeah, that's a little weird. Why are they confiding in you about classified intelligence operations? Care to explain that one? He says that like it's a great thing. He's like, I happen to know that. It's like, yeah, okay, so you're talking to the Gulf? You're talking to Saudi intelligence? Okay. Yeah, totally normal. Having a normal one. I guess that's a take. He goes, I happen to know that. Yeah, how, and by the way, how do you know that? Because that's really bizarre.
Frankie sent $25.
Thanks.
Temps sent $20. We should be cooking the white people who have no idea about Islam Asian from CP.
I don't know what
SD Lord sent
Thanks.
$30. I'm not to dox myself, but I'm traveling to Cali soon. What do you think about Iran's threats to bomb Cali with drones weekend?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, that sounds like it's ridiculous, but who knows?
Dr. Curious sent $20. Advice for government drones. Don't try to explain to your wife how to vote in any way other than the lesser of two evils.
What? What? Okay.
Jackson J. Wells sent $20. Did you see those two retards interview Fishback at the Resto? Sub 100 IQ combined.
I don't know who you're talking
GE Narrations Outlet sent $20.
First off, especially because you know what the
It's a
narrative.
cultural retcon unlike anything I've ever seen. They will still support
Fumble
Trump
this,
even
bro,
with boots on the
solidify.
ground. The Dems must win in November.
It is like the Twilight Zone. It's actually scary.
Nick Loftus Nico sent $30. Been watching since the first Iran war last year. My entire crew at work supports you. Keep doing what you're doing, King.
Thanks. Let's go. W work.
User-
W wagey.
User 1257456 sent $20.
Shout out to
Hey,
the
Nick,
wages.
were the tiny hats behind the pandemic? I've been teaching this to my kids. Mainly how to think, not what to think, though. What other fundamental axioms could I teach my kids? Charles Buell sent $20.
Never kill yourself.
Charles Buell sent
How
$20.
about
Bad
that?
economy. Epstein files have people.
There's a fundamental axiom: never commit suicide, no matter how hopeless
Charles Buell
it
sent
gets.
$20. Bad economy. Epstein files have PPL angry now, and you are focused on voting again? Is it impossible to get Christian protests?
That's what they want.
Please separate me from my supporters. I don't want to see them. Get me away from them. Get me away from you people. Honestly, I can't talk to you people anymore. I'm sick of it.
Maxine the Queen sent
Can't do
$100.
it.
How close do you think society is to a Soylent Green scenario? Deadass.
I don't think that's gonna happen, but who knows? Your guess is as good as mine. Thanks for the big super chat.
Ukraine.
When is that movie gonna
Ukraine
happen?
Boy sent $20.
I
Boys
don't
will be
know.
boys.
It's so true. The boy, bless their little hearts. Let's just give them a big plot of land. Let's fill their bellies with slop. And let's give them entertainment to watch on TV. Bless them.
Huckleberry999 sent $20. Regarding Joe Rogan, you should watch Fear Factor. By the way, who do you have intel from Homeland Security without being connected to the establishment?
Yeah, let me just give you their name and
Zachary
address.
Roberts sent $20. Nick, U.S. admits we're behind bombing Iranian school in Minop. 180 dead kids from bad intel on a base. Seems pretty Jewy.
Oh, I didn't hear about
Soren
it.
sent
Thanks for
$20.
telling
Do you think
me.
Trump genuinely cares what happens in 2028? Or
I don't think he cares about it.
Charles Lee sent $50. The AF hat looks great. Do you not identify as conservative because MAGA calls themselves conservative? Or is being a nationalist different?
Oh my God.
Ruthless Zoomer sent $20. Hey Nick, what is your definitive opinion of the AGL, Anti-Gooning League? White Millennial sent $20. Daily viewer here. I work at a school in the South. I hide my power level but want you to know a lot of white kids are
Let's
fans.
go!
#AF.
I've heard that. I do have a lot of high school age fans. W's in the chat. I love high schoolers. Wait! No, I didn't mean it like that! No, don't clip that! That's obviously a joke. Yeah, no. The high schoolers are based. It is the millennials and the Gen Xers that carry water for the boomer. For the sick and degenerate boomer
Maxine the Queen
race.
sent $50. With the war in Iran, meta draft again. Do you think America today, especially in states like Florida with huge veteran communities, would show up, or would there be mass resistance? #Fishback 2026.
That's just like, we're talking about a movie that is
Mad Dog America sent $20. Not to sound like no, but I see no hope for years until we get an America First candidate in there. GOP isn't going to recover for a while, and there are too many illegals who are future Dems here.
Oh my god.
Cope Deeper sent $100. My mom's Cope is crazy. The other day she said that the fact that even Hillary applauded Trump's Iran strike means it's obviously good. If even
That's
she thought so.
amazing.
Not realizing he is the one who became one of them. Lamau. These boomers, bro.
Thanks for the big super chat. I love that take. No, but that's actually what you want to see. Do you remember last year when the establishment lined up to support Trump and all the Trump sycophants said, that's actually a good thing? Here's why that's actually a good thing. Here's why that's actually what you want to see. That's how you know we're winning. Remember they used to say that? You'd be like, hey, why is Jeff Bezos donating to the inauguration fund? And they're like, well, that's actually how you know we're winning. That's what you want to see. It's like, oh yeah? How do you know that? Based on what? What are you talking about? You go, hey, wait, why is Mark Zuckerberg not fighting Trump tooth and nail like he did in 2020? In 2020, Zuckerberg gave $300 million for get out the vote for Joe Biden. Now he's not spending any money. Why is that? Did Mark Zuckerberg become a base groiper? And they go, well, that's actually what you want to see. That's how you know we're winning. That's actually a really good sign. Really? Why? Because one of two things happened. Either Trump became a bitch to the establishment, or Zuckerberg became red-pilled and wants white nationalism. So which do you think is more likely? Those are the options that I see there. But yeah, like this, Hillary supports it. Well, that just goes to show we're winning. Even Hillary has seen the light. Yeah, everyone's having an epiphany every single day.
Maxine the Queen once sent $50.
It's
If
great.
sleeper cells were operating in the U.S., would local news actually report it, or would that information be kept quiet?
What? Why would local news? Local news would probably tell the law enforcement. What do you mean? You think that like your local NBC affiliate is like aware of an Iranian sleeper cell? Like, what are you talking about? I don't even know what that
Unit
means.
4% $20. Hot take. Voting truly hasn't mattered since the Jewish people blew JFK's head smooth off for criticizing their weasel ass ways.
That's really deep. That's really deep. I've never met someone like you before. You're really intelligent. It's like when you see these TikToks. You ever see these TikToks where it's like, Drop one hot take in the comments that no one is ready for yet. And people leave a comment and they're like, I can't even think of an example, but they say just like the dumbest shit ever. They're like, fake friends actually suck. You know, they say it's like the most like pedestrian thing you've ever heard in your life. They're like, I think religion divides people more than it unites people. I think religion is the cause of all wars. I think that you don't need to be religious to be a good person. You know, they say, I think Christians are hypocrites sometimes. You know, it's like stuff like that. It's like in that vein. I think the rich want to divide us based on gender and ideology. And it has like 15,000 likes. Thanks for the Reddit gold, strangers. Drop one hot take in the comments that the world isn't ready for. Yeah. Hot take. I don't think voting has truly mattered since the Jews.
Jan Malinowski sent $20. Trump's $18 trillion trade.
We live in Goyim hell. We live in Goyim hell. And we are prisoners here. Welcome to hell. Welcome to Goyim hell. I'll be your guide. We're all prisoners here.
Jan Malinowski sent $20. Trump's $18 trillion trade deal investment figure was exaggerated. Fair play. You were right. However, do you think it is possible Trump is now hitting your hand to squeeze China, one who's dependent, for leverage?
That's crazy.
Obelisk 3 cent $50.
Wow.
You've been vindicated, but so is your methodology in assessing events/topics. Focusing on the evidence and not delving blindly in sensationalism, talks of mysticism or aliens.
Okay.
Hydrai sent $20. Thoughts on John Kiriakou? Ten Below Sousa sent $20. What's your stance on far-right atheists? Many in Australasia sharing the same values as you without the religious aspect.
Go to hell
Off the comp 4,000 sent $50. Is Trump laying in bed right now in a peaceful mental state accepting the fall of his legacy, or is he absolutely off his motherfucking rocker in regret?
Trump is off his fucking rocker. He was like, okay, fuck it, I guess we'll invade Iran. And like, fuck it, I'll just invade Iran or some shit. You think Trump is laying awake at night?
Oh my fucking god.
You eat an entire bag of Doritos while watching American Dad, but you get high in your apartment, and Trump is nothing like
CPAC Suck and Fuck Winner 2026 sent $20. I hope I'm wrong, but I just don't see how our country doesn't end up in some type of civil war eventually. Not advocating.
Wow. Interesting perspective.
Cheryl writes Urethates fine sent $20. Nick is burning broken foot. JK. Thanks. Ray and Peter sent $20. Hey nigga, can you please take me to the show in LA, please nigga?
I don't know if I'm gonna go. I don't know if I'm gonna... Like, you apologize to the Jews so they let you perform again?
Obelisk 3 sent $50.
Okay.
The Jews winning vindicates their methodology.
I guess,
Infiltrating
bro.
power structures for centuries, leaving unfinished WRK to their offspring. We must be prepared to plant trees for shade we may never sit in. Shaver sent $20. If anyone in chat is 18 to 25 and you're not in college full-time, you better pick up some summer courses in community college or have a pathway for CO status.
Why are you telling
Black
everybody
Dude
what
Rover
to
sent
do?
$20. I'm a black Jew in America. Should I go back to Israel or Africa? Maybe Egypt? I want to be with my religion, and mine it is. Nick Lex Domino sent $25. Now the Jews are trying to categorize Epstein as a self-hating Jew who loves Islam. Another collab with Hans Quiz?
Yeah.
Shamba Kingston sent $20. Boy, they here's some shekels from my lawsuit against Harvard. We love to sue. Linux still sent $20. Thoughts on age verification bills requiring OS level age check? Bills now in multiple states simultaneously. Digital ID? Danielle Carey 3 sent $20. Used to watch my match every day until I found you. Guys, a sellout. Thanks for opening my eyes. Hope you use that money for feeding good fuel to your body.
Okay.
Griffin Fuller sent $20.
Very good callback.
Griffin Fuller sent
Well
$20.
done.
My dad did 5 tours and served 27 years in the Marine Corps during the Iraq and Afghanistan. Thank you for bringing light to the truth of what was going on over in the Middle East.
You
This dog
got
hunts
it.
988 cent.
W. Dad
This
survived
dog
the
hunts
Zog
988 sent
War.
$20. The distractions they feed us. Like fish in a bowl. Dead on. Always, look, then nothing. Nothing ever. Unless it is a mid-level white person. No one ever gets in trouble. White privilege. LOL. Bugenhagen sent $25. College Republicans named as political director, but fraternization with Democrat influencer Nick Fuentes risks it all. Eyes emoji.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Pilgrim Crowds.
Doyle should go and help him out. I mean, Doyle should go and jump to his defense or something. I don't want to get too involved because I know my association is toxic, so I don't want to get him in any more trouble. But you know, some of these people, all they seem to be doing is attacking
Pilgrim
him.
Crowd sent $20. Outstanding show. You're right that nature hates a vacuum, and sadly Trump filled it in a bomb in his base at the same time. Yakov sent $30. Do you agree with Esther Villar's theory that we live in a shadow matriarchy, and the idea of a patriarchy is a myth?
Not familiar with
Ciago I for $19.99 sent $20. Too many conservatives who don't know anything about politics like Trump for Zora and nothing else. Will be tough to win 28 if Trump is campaigning against the Vietnam. Abelvix sent $20. Biden 2028 put that old fart back in office, but he can't retire yet.
Yeah.
Brad just sent $20. Thank you for a great show.
Bad.
Will you do a collab with JF to ready for the old heads sometime soon? He's doing great work and is a big supporter. We all appreciate you and your message very much.
Yeah, I'm open to it. I like JF a
Alex
lot.
Pacheco sent $22. Genuinely curious how you navigate your daily life with all these evil people wishing death / coming for you. God bless you.
It's miserable. It is a miserable affair that I endure.
Kabaya Jean sent $20. I'm writing in your name in the belly. NJF 2028. Cody sent $20. How about you tell us to vote it?
Don't tell Timothy
Cody sent
Chalamet. He hates
$20.
that.
How about you tell us to vote independent? And stop referencing the New York Times. Alex NFH sent $50. Hey Nick, how you doing?
Yeah, with that attitude, you're only insulting
Wonder
yourself.
Pets Patriot sent $20. KRD for Nick. No, that's an optical. R&D. So now. D for Nick Fuentes. Hots percent 50. Hots percent $50. Hilarious seeing the plan trusting permago niggers on X say shit like we when talking about this admin as if they're on a team or have any say so in policy decisions.
Yeah, we're gonna do this. The posters are in control.
JRP sent $20. Deep state is on both sides, so it doesn't matter what you vote. You're a great news source even though you're not radical enough. Smile. Staler 3016 sent $20. I'm done with you. You are a traitor, you fucking Democrat.
Bye bye. Yeah.
Double2 Double sent $20. Trump sucks.
Have
But if
a
the
good
left takes
time.
power, they'll never give it back. AI is going to end history as we know it. You think the pendulum is going to swing back and forth as it always has, but it won't.
Yeah, I'll take my chances. Claude still sucks. You know, I asked Claude to like fill in a map. I was filling in a map of the Middle East, and I said, "Hey, Claude, can you color in Azerbaijan and Jordan?" And it couldn't do it. So, yeah, I know for the 100th time it's happening for real. AI is actually happening this time, guys. No, for real, it's actually gonna happen. It's like, okay, well, it's still retarded. It still can't do 90% of what I want it to do. So it still won't tell me what race people look like based on a picture of their face. It refuses. It still can't color a map. It still can't do math or chemistry or anything.
Face of the Negro Slayer sent $27. Listen here, little baby. You're gonna get a lot of hurtful and degrading super chats, but that ain't what I'm about. Let me just say, you are perfect the way you are. You hear me, sugar? Perfect. Don't ever change. You deserve anything and everything you want. Stay safe for me, baby girl. Greater than Batman sent 44 cent $50. Invited my parents over Sunday after church. Listened to Alex Jones while I cooked. They walked in during the A. I bit with Trump, JP, and Alex on Jeopardy. He was a really big fucking bag of Trump.
I didn't see that.
Friend ruler of USA sent $20. We must raise and have a hostile Christian nationalist takeover of every sector of the U.S. government. Nothing will deter us.
Whoa.
Luke Neely sent $20. W Mexican maxing also aren't they the least to race mix maybe only with whites though Lamau.
I don't know. I'm not.
Him just American
I'm not
03 cent
watching that
$100.
statistic.
I like how you're trying to get us learning to use our growing power and we spite you with our zero understanding of the bigger ground that you have for us.
Thank you for the big super chat. Yeah, the Goyim are beyond saving, honestly.
Out Lady of Glory sent $20. What do you suggest someone does if they live in Virginia with Spencer status and spike electric bills, gun banning, gerrymander? With a lot at stake, do we stay home? Big Green 4440 sent $20. You're a freak. Jan Malinowski sent $20. Do you think it is possible that the strike on Iran is connected to an effort to put an oil squeeze on China? Hormuz depend. Grigor Shekels sent $20. The media never speaks on Operation Ajax and how that lead to Iran's current situation. They chimp out how the Ayatollah is a terrorist, when the US supported the Shah that was a disappearing people. Emra Sirius sent $20. Greetings from Turkey, Nick. Are we the next in Israel's crosshairs after Iran? What does Mystic Nick predict?
They're part of NATO, so it's not the same
67
thing.
Wang 67 sent $20. I think you're actually Tucker's dad, that's why he got so upset you blew your guy's cover. Also free Mossad. Roy for Mom sent $100. Roy for Mom of 2 young boys. Found you last year and I'm so relieved to finally have found someone in the information space who speaks the truth and has integrity. God bless you and the movement.
Hey, thanks a lot. Thank you for the big super chat, W Convert, W Family. Love to hear it. Thank you very
Mike
much.
sent $20. Wearing tuxes for the wedding Lamau, but just quarter zips for the guys.
Okay.
Crypt 84 sent $100. Mass deportation should be sold as a humanitarian foreign migration and rebuilding program. Sort of like how Trump said helping the people of Iran has been one of his excuses for war.
Yeah, because that's what's missing, right? We didn't brand it in a transparently subversive way.
Well, so if we call it humanitarian, then they'll let us do it.
Yeah. Well, here, with one little rhetorical trick, then they'll have to let us do it. That's just, okay. That's how Goyim think. That's like your brain on being a Goyim.
Veronica sent $100. Okay, I could have figured out how to change my name on here that would have been funny. FML. Gigi sent $20. I wanted the borders closed and illegals deported. That wasn't going to happen at all in Paris. One filibuster. Young Turk 17 sent $20. JD, are you under there? Smiley
You like
face
that?
emoji.
You like
Smiley.
that little bit?
Jacob Billy sent $20. We vote for principles, not parties. When a party abandons its word, the people must remind it who holds the power.
Wow, it's really profound.
Timothy Ukin Husky sent $20. Why were you weird when you streamed with Clav and Sneeko? You talk like a robot in front of them, not like one of the boys. You were scared to go on Clav's balcony like a weirdo. You are Aristotle to him.
I'm afraid of heights, okay? I don't like being on a balcony. As far as the other stuff, I don't know. I think I talk normal.
Hemp sent $20. My last super chat
Ooh,
was a quote from Sneeko. We should be cooking the white
XQC
people who have
drop.
no idea about Islam.
Really? Wow. Well, that's not good.
RB Groy percent $25. Would you ever go on Joe Rogan if he invited you? And would you consider debating as Mungold on the Iran war?
You know who
Have
else
you
I
ever
saw-
heard of James Fishback? Also, what book recommendations do you have?
Oh boy. Funny. Good job. Wow. Very good. Okay. All right. Okay. Well, that's all the super chats for tonight. Well, hey, got what you paid for. Got what you paid for with your super chat money. There you have it. Good job, everyone. We did it. All right. Well, that's our last super chat. Is it Friday yet? Oh, man. That's all I got for you. Remember to smash the follow button, smash the like button, leave a comment. Let me know what you think about the show. I'm on the air Monday through Friday. I'll be here earlier tomorrow, I promise. Thank you to our top super chatters. Special thanks to Veronica, Maxine, Average John, Talk Ticker, Obelisk, Just American, Groiper Mom, and Crypt. Thanks to them. Thanks to all our super chatters, everybody that watches. We love you.
You think?
Day. I can't watch this guy.
They have that he owed his position to Donald Trump. You would think that he would tell Donald Trump what he wanted to hear about going to war against Iran. But on the contrary, what Kane did before the war, this is before February 28th, was he made it very clear to President Trump that we did not have a viable military option. So when you say that General Kane, every time he's tried it out, looks very uncomfortable, I think that's true. And I think there's a simple explanation for why he looks so uncomfortable. He knew from the get-go that this one was not going to work out the way Trump and Netanyahu thought that it was going to work out. And he understands that he is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and he was the chairman when we entered this foolish war on February 28th, despite the fact that he had warned against it.
Is it too simplistic to say that Trump and Netanyahu naively believe that by taking out the supreme leader and some of the hierarchy, there would be regime change and the war would be over?
I think that's clearly the case with Trump. I think that was the argument that Netanyahu sold to Trump, and Trump liked the argument. I think given what happened in Venezuela, he thought that we had the ability to fly like a butterfly and sting like a bee. And when Bibi told him that the regime in Iran is weak and all we have to do is decapitate it and really hit hard on that first day or two, the regime would crumble and you would end up with a pro-American, pro-Israeli regime in its place. I think Netanyahu was very successful at telling Trump that story, and Trump is not exactly surrounded by wise advisors, save for General Kane, who would tell him otherwise. So he fell into the trap. Now Netanyahu is a more complicated case. One could argue that Netanyahu understood that a decapitation strike wouldn't work, that this would not be a quick and decisive victory, and that instead what he was trying to do was trap Trump into a long war, in which case Iran would be destroyed. In other words, Netanyahu understood that the regime would not fall quickly, but once we committed to fighting the war, we would have no choice but to see it through. And that's the situation that we're in now. So that's a possible argument. It's hard to know for sure whether it's true, but it's also possible, just having watched Netanyahu over time, that he too bamboozled himself into believing that the Iranian regime was fragile and it would easily affect regime change. You know, he's been saying that for a long time, as you well know, Chris. And sometimes when people repeat particular arguments, after a while, they even begin to believe their own arguments, although they initially did not. So it's possible that Bibi fooled himself, or it's possible that he was just tricking Trump into getting into this war.
But the Israeli goal is different from the American goal. The Americans want regime change. The Israelis want to create a failed state. They want to fragment Iran the same way they fragmented and destroyed Iraq, the same way they turned Libya into a failed state. Those are very different goals.
I agree with that. But the Israelis don't advertise that fact. I think the Israeli view is that they got regime change and they have a pro-American / pro-Israel regime in place, that then they wouldn't have to worry that much about destroying the country. But I think that they probably understand that that's not going to happen. That Iran's not going away, and given that Iran is not going away, let's do to Iran what we did to Syria. And then we're done with Iran, we can turn to Turkey and break Turkey apart.
Well, let's talk about a country that does that strategy, which is the United States. And that's Iran. What I found interesting is rather than confront the American military might on the ships, they have decided, quite astutely and quite methodically, to destroy the economic machinery, not only in the Gulf, but globally.
Yeah, the Iranians are pursuing a smart strategy. You go back to General Kane. General Kane has made a number of comments about the Iranians that make clear that he respects their ability to strategize in this war. He is not contemptuous of the Iranians. You listen to Hegseth and Trump talk. They talk about the Iranians like they're a bunch of country bumpkins, and we're the strategic geniuses. And not only do we have an advantage in material power, we Americans have an advantage in having strategically. I think that's not the case. I think if you listen carefully to General Kane, he's making that point. We are up against a formidable adversary. Given what you said, given what General Kane said, they have a lot of cards to play. The key here, Chris, is that Iran has a huge arsenal of short-range ballistic missiles and drones that it can use against the Gulf states. And the Gulf states present a target-rich environment. It's easy to use those drones and those short-range ballistic missiles to do great damage to all the countries in the Gulf, including Saudi Arabia. The Iranians also have a lot of long-range missiles and also long-range drones that can hit Israel. Now, there's not done much of that up to now. Very important to understand that in the 12-day war last June, the Iranians fought almost exclusively against Israel. They did not target American military bases in the region. And they did not target the Gulf states. In this war, they're targeting Israel, American military installations in the region, and the Gulf states. And in the first part of the war, up to pretty much now, they've concentrated mainly on attacking American installations and attacking the Gulf states. But they have announced that they are now beginning to switch the focus, and they're going to concentrate much more on attacking Israel. And they have the long-range ballistic missiles, and they have drones, which they can use to hit Israel. And the problem that the Israelis face, and of course this is a problem that the Americans face, is that we only have a finite number of defensive missiles that can be used to shoot down those incoming ballistic missiles. And even when we use those defensive missiles, they oftentimes don't hit the incoming Iranian ballistic missile. So we have this situation in the Gulf and in Israel where the Iranians have the capability to pound all of those countries for a long period of time. And there's nothing we can do about it. And in fact, as time goes by, our ability to shoot down those missiles, shoot down the drones, decreases. It doesn't flatline, and it certainly doesn't increase. It decreases. So the Iranians have a serious set of military options against us. And what this means, Chris, is that as we walk up the escalation ladder, and that's what we're likely to do if we can't find an off-ramp, and I don't think we're going to find an off-ramp. If we don't find an off-ramp, I think what we'll do is march up the escalation ladder. And of course, Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump will say we have escalation dominance as you go up that escalation ladder. But I don't think that's true. I think the Iranians have powerful cards to play, and therefore we are in a really terrible situation.
What does that escalation ladder look like? Well, I mean, already carrying out virtually saturation bombing of Tehran.
Not yet. They're pounding Iran. There's no question about that. They're pounding Tehran. But they have not killed more than 1,500 people. I mean, it's terribly regrettable that they've even killed one person, much less 1,500, or whatever the number is. But they have not gone that far. The Israelis and the Americans have not gone that far up the escalation ladder. And in a very important way, there's evidence that the Americans are discouraging the Israelis from going too far, too fast up the escalation ladder. Because we understand that the Iranians have second strike capability. The Israelis don't care that much because the Israelis want to see us get deeply involved in this war. And of course, Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump will say we have escalation dominance as you go up that escalation ladder. But I don't think that's true. I think the Iranians have powerful cards to play, and therefore we are in a really terrible situation.
What does that escalation ladder look like? Well, I mean, they're already carrying out virtually saturation bombing in Tehran.
Not yet. They're pounding Iran. There's no question about that. They're pounding Tehran. But they have not killed more than 1,500 people. I mean, it's terribly regrettable that they've even killed one person, much less 1,500 or whatever the number is. But they have not gone that far. The Israelis and the Americans have not gone that far up the escalation ladder. And in a very important way, there's evidence that the Americans are discouraging the Israelis from going too far and too fast up the escalation ladder. Because we understand that the Iranians have second-rate capability. The Israelis don't care that much because the Israelis want to see us get deeply involved in this war and destroy Iran. They'd like us to level every city in Iran, break the country apart. But Trump does not, at this point, want to go down that road. But I think what happens here, Chris, as we march up the escalation ladder, is that we target civilian areas. We end up killing larger and larger numbers of people. And furthermore, we look at the idea of tearing apart Iran's petroleum infrastructure and maybe their desalination plants as well. We begin to really try to throttle the regime, to strangle it. And again, this involves not just simply killing people, which I think if we get desperate enough, we'll do. The Israelis, of course, would have no problem doing that. And ultimately, I think if we got desperate enough, we would not either. But again, the problem is we do those things, the Iranians will retaliate. If we go after energy infrastructure in Iran, the Iranians will go after more and more energy infrastructure in the Gulf, in Gulf states. If we go after desalination plants, they'll go after desalination plants in places like Saudi Arabia and Israel itself. I think the Israelis have 4 or 5 big desalination plants that they depend heavily on. And I think the Iranians will be incentivized to take them out if we, or the Israelis, or both of us, go after their desalination plants. So you can see that as we go up the escalation ladder, the Iranians will go up with us. And I don't see how you can make the case that we have escalation dominance in any meaningful way, especially when you take into account the fact that the historical record is quite clear here that countries can suffer enormous amounts of punishment in these sorts of air campaigns, and the population does not rise up against the government and overthrow it. And in fact, what happens in most of those cases, if not all those cases, is that the population rallies around the flag. So if we think, or the Israelis think, that killing Iranian civilians is going to put pressure on the government to quit the war, I think that is erroneous thinking.
We tried that in Vietnam.
We tried it in Korea. If you ever look at what we did in North Korea during the Korean War, it's horrific. It's much worse than what we did in Vietnam. And then you go back to World War I, World War II. Actually, not World War I, World War II in Europe and World War II in East Asia against Japan. The number of people that we killed, it's just hard to believe that. And ultimately, I think if we got desperate enough, we would not either. But again, the problem is we do those things, the Iranians will retaliate. If we go after energy infrastructure in Iran, the Iranians will go after more and more energy infrastructure in the Gulf, in Gulf states. If we go after desalination plants, they'll go after desalination plants in places like Saudi Arabia and Israel itself. I think the Israelis have 4 or 5 big desalination plants that they depend heavily on. And I think the Iranians will be incentivized to take them out if we, or the Israelis, or both of us, go after their desalination plants. So you can see that as we go up the escalation ladder, the Iranians will go up with us. And I don't see how you can make the case that we have escalation dominance in any meaningful way, especially when you take into account the fact that the historical record is quite clear here that countries can suffer enormous amounts of punishment in these sorts of air campaigns, and the population does not rise up against the government and overthrow it. And in fact, what happens in most of those cases, if not all those cases, is that the population rallies around the flag. So if we think, or the Israelis think, that killing Iranian civilians is going to put pressure on the government to quit the war, I think that is erroneous thinking.
We tried that in Vietnam.
We tried it in Korea. If you ever look at what we did in North Korea during the Korean War, it's horrific. It's much worse than what we did in Vietnam. And then you go back to World War I, World War II. Actually, not World War I, World War II in Europe and World War II in East Asia against Japan. The number of people that we killed is just hard to believe. But it's very hard, if not impossible, to get those air campaigns to cause the government to quit.
Well, is there an example of an air campaign that does break the government? I don't think so. Historically, is there?
No, I think the only case you could make is the dropping 2 nuclear weapons on Hiroshima and Nagasaki on August 6th and August 9th got the Japanese to finally quit. The Japanese were at the edge of the cliff by August of 1945. And the question was what pushed them off the cliff? And some people would argue it was the 2 nuclear weapons on those 2 dates. I actually think that's not true. I think it was when the Russians came down on August 8th. Remember, the war in Europe was won on May 8th, 1945. And at Yalta, the Russians or the Soviets had said that they would come in 3 months after the war in Europe ended. In other words, they would come into the war against Japan 3 months after the war in Europe ended. And the war in Europe ends on May 8th, 1945. And 3 months later, on August 8th, 1945, the Soviets invade against the Japanese Kwantung Army in Manchuria and quickly overrun it. I believe that it's the Soviet decision to attack Japan on August 8th, which is in between the 2 bombs on August 6th and August 9th. It is the critical factor that gets the Japanese to throw up their hands. But that's the only case you can make where one would say that air power helped a bit to end the war. But just quickly, Chris, on that case, because it's important to understand that we start firebombing Japan on the evening of March 10th, 11th, 1945. And the first night that we firebombed Tokyo, this is March 10th, we kill more Japanese than are killed in Hiroshima or Nagasaki. Just think about that. That's the first night we firebombed Tokyo. And then we're working our way down the list of large Japanese cities and firebombing them, murdering huge numbers of people. Just truly remarkable. And the Japanese don't quit. They don't quit until August. And that, of course, is when the 2 nuclear weapons are dropped and the Soviets come into the war. And that's sort of the coup de grace. But firebombing just didn't work. It supports the basic point that I'm making, that you can murder, and this is really murder because you're purposely targeting civilians. You can murder huge numbers of civilians, and it doesn't work. The historical record is remarkably clear on this. And here we are in Iran. We're not going to send ground forces in. We're going to rely on air power. We're going to bomb, and we're going to bomb Iran and win the war. We're going to create regime change without sending ground forces in. Just going to do it through the air. The historical record makes it unequivocal. 2 dates.
I actually think that's not throw it. And in fact, what happens in most of those cases, if not all those cases, is that the population rallies around the flag. So if we think, or the Israelis think, that killing Iranian civilians is going to put pressure on the government to quit the war, I think that is erroneous thinking.
Well, we tried that in Vietnam.
We tried it in Korea. If you ever look at what we did to North Korea during the Korean War, it's horrific. It's much worse than what we did in Vietnam. And then you go back to World War I, World War II. Excuse me, not World War I, World War II in Europe and World War II in East Asia against Japan. The number of people that we killed, which is hard to believe. But it's very hard, if not impossible, to get, those air campaigns to cause a government to quit.
Well, is there an example of an air campaign that does break?
Government to quit the war, I think that is erroneous thinking.
Well, we tried that in Vietnam.
We tried it in Korea. If you ever look at what we did to North Korea during the Korean War, it's horrific. It's much worse than what we did in Vietnam. And then you go back to World War I, World War II. Actually, not World War I, World War II in Europe and World War II in East Asia against Japan. The number of people to be killed is just hard to believe. But it's very hard, if not impossible, to get those air campaigns to cause the government to quit.
Well, is there an example of an air campaign that does break the government? I don't think so. Historically, is there?
No, I think the only case you could make is the dropping 2 nuclear weapons on Hiroshima and Nagasaki on August 6th and August 9th got the Japanese to finally quit. The Japanese were at the edge of the cliff by August of 1945. And the question was what pushed them off the cliff. And some people would argue it was the 2 nuclear weapons on those 2 dates. I actually think that's not true. I think it was when the Russians came in on August 8th. Remember, the war in Europe is won on May 8th, 1945. And at Yalta, the Russians or the Soviets had said that they would come in 3 months after the war in Europe ended. In other words, they would come into the war against Japan 3 months after the war in Europe ended. And the war in Europe ends on May 8th, 1945. And 3 months later, on August 8th, 1945, the Soviets invade against the Japanese Kwantung Army in Manchuria and quickly overrun it. I believe that it's the Soviet decision to attack Japan on August 8th, which is in between the 2 bombs on August 6th and August 9th, that is the critical factor that gets the Japanese to throw up their hands. But that's the only case you can make where one could say that air power helped a bit to end the war. But just quickly, Chris, on that case, because it's important to understand it, we start firebombing Japan on the evening of March 10th, 11th, 1945. And the first night that we firebomb Tokyo, this is March 10th, we kill more Japanese than are killed at either Hiroshima or Nagasaki. Just think about that. That's the first night we firebomb Tokyo. And then we're working our way down the list of large Japanese cities and firebombing them, murdering huge numbers of people. Just truly remarkable. And the Japanese don't quit. They don't quit until August. And that, of course, is when the 2 nuclear weapons are dropped and the Soviets come into the war. And that's sort of the coup de grace. But firebombing just didn't work. It supports the basic point that I'm making, that you can murder. And this is really murder because you're purposely targeting civilians. You can murder huge numbers of civilians, and it doesn't work. The historical record is remarkably clear on this. And here we are in Iran. We're not going to send ground forces in, right? We're going to rely on air power. We're going to bomb, and we're going to bomb Iran and win the war. We're going to create regime change without sending ground forces in. Just going to do it through the air. The historical record makes it unequivocally clear that this is almost impossible to do. Absent a miracle, and I don't believe in miracles, it's hard to get regime change, or impossible to get regime change using air power alone. You got to send boots. You got to put boots on the ground. This is what we did in Iraq. We had to invade Iraq to get regime change. And if you want regime change in Iran, you're going to have to invade that country. And that's not going to happen. The country's much too big. There are too many people. And furthermore, we've been there before. It doesn't work very well. And even Donald Trump is smart enough to know that sending an army into Iran would be a real prescription for disaster.
So about the economic impact of shutting down the Strait of Hormuz, just on the issue of desalination plants, having worked in Saudi Arabia, you take these out, you have a huge humanitarian crisis. Some cities like Riyadh are almost completely dependent on desalination.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And the administration, the Trump administration, has told the Israelis to stay away from desalination plants. And we do not want to get into a war where both sides are attempting to destroy the desalination plants on each side. This would not be good because, as you say, it would be catastrophic disaster for the people in all of those countries in the Gulf region. And I believe it would have devastating effects inside Israel as well if the Iranians were able to take out those 4 or 5 desalination plants that the Israelis have. So I think that, for the time being anyway, we'll stay away from that. The economic consequences, have not been fully felt yet. And we'll see what happens with the passage of time. Very interestingly, the Iranians are still shipping oil out of the Gulf. Needless to say, Iranian tankers or tankers carrying Iranian oil are not going to be sunk by the Iranians, and they can make their way through the Straits of Hormuz. So the Iranians are still selling oil.
Which I think 80% of their seaborne oil goes to China. Is that correct?
I think that's right, yeah. But I think that if you look at China's present situation in terms of how much oil it has in reserve, where it gets its additional oil from, China is not going to be hurt that much, at least initially, if the oil is cut off. It's Japan and South Korea that are going to be clobbered. Japan and South Korea are more dependent on oil coming out of the Gulf than the Chinese are. It's quite interesting here, Chris, but if you think about it, the Europeans are really going to be hurt badly if the oil is cut off for a sustained period of time. And you want to remember, the Europeans are already in trouble because they're not getting oil and gas in the way they used to from Russia. And now they're depending more on the United States and the Middle East. So if you cut off the flow of oil and gas from the Middle East to Europe, on top of the fact that all that oil and gas coming out of Russia has been curtailed, you can see with the European economies, which are already struggling, are going to be even in more trouble. So Europe is going to be hurt. It looks like Japan and South Korea are going to be hurt. And then there are countries, that are less developed, like Nigeria, that are going to pay a real price as a result of what's happening here. So the economic consequences, which are just beginning to be felt, could be significantly worse. And the consequences of this for the world economy could be catastrophic. And of course, the Trump administration fully understands that. They understand that, to some extent, it's hard to predict exactly how this plays out, but they surely understand that you can tell plausible stories as to how this ends up being one giant nightmare. Again, it's not to say that will happen, but you can tell plausible stories about how this becomes a nightmare. We go far enough up the escalation ladder, and the Iranians really go after the Gulf states and really go to great lengths to destroy their oil infrastructure and gas infrastructure. The consequences could be disastrous for everyone on the planet, and the Trump administration understands that. They don't want to take any chances here. This is why you see evidence that the Trump administration is looking for an off-ramp.
Well, the Iranians aren't going to give it to them, are they?
They'd be crazy to give it to them unless they get a good deal. You hardly see any talk about this in the mainstream media, but all of the talk revolving around the question of an off-ramp and ending this war has to do with how we think we fared in the end and how we think the Israelis fared in the end. In other words, the Israelis are fearful that if we cut a deal now without regime change or without destroying Iran, this will be a victory for Iran, and the Americans might be happy, but we're not happy. And President Trump and his people are thinking that given that we have the midterm elections coming up, the war's not going well, we have to end it. And even if we don't have a decisive victory, so be it. It's just important that we get this war put to bed and declare victory and then start worrying about the election in November. That's the way the discourse is evolving in the West. But nobody seems to understand understand that to get the Iranians to quit, you have to offer them a deal that they find acceptable, because they're in the driver's seat now. The war is playing to their advantage. They figured out that they have leverage over the United States and over Israel. The fact that they have all these ballistic missiles and all these drones, and they're operating in a target-rich environment, they understand that they don't want to quit here, right? They want to use this capability to give them leverage. And you say to yourself, leverage for what? Leverage to get a deal at the end of this conflict, to get some sort of arrangement put in place that leaves them much better off than they were before February 28th. So what exactly does that mean? First of all, they're going to want sanctions relief. They're going to want major sanctions relief. They're probably going to want reparations. And they're probably going to want some sort of arrangement that guarantees that the Israelis and the Americans can't pay them a return visit in 6 months or a year. Remember, last June, there was a war against Iran. And here we are in March with another war against Iran. This is, in less than 1 year, Iran has been attacked 2 times by the tag team. They don't want a third war. And the question is, how can they prevent a third war? How can they get these sanctions finally taken off of Iran? These are issues that they care greatly about. And when they negotiate an armistice or a peace agreement or some sort of deal to put an end to this war, they're going to have demands. And we're going to have to meet those demands. And if we don't meet those demands, they have an incentive to continue upping the ante until we do agree to certain of those demands. And this is why I say it's hard to see where the United States has a clear off-ramp today. Because it's not just getting the Israelis on board with quitting this war. You have to work to deal with the Iranians. And given the balance of, what looks like the balance of power now between Iran on one side and the United States and the Israelis on the other side, in terms of the conduct of the war, they have no incentive to quit. They should continue to fight.
Let's talk about the consequences. Let's say this does become protracted, weeks, months. You use the word catastrophic. Paint a picture of what the global economy could look like.
Well, you could have a worldwide depression. You could have something less than that, like a worldwide recession. It would have huge consequences for people all over the planet, especially in developing countries. Less so in developed countries, but even in developed countries, it's quite clear that the importance of oil for running the international economy simply can't be underestimated. It's very interesting, but for people who study grand strategy like I do, and you talk about what areas of the world matter to the United States, where are our vital interests at stake? Almost everybody says that outside of the Western Hemisphere, East Asia and Europe matter enormously, and they have both mattered enormously over time, because that's where the other great powers are. But then the question is, why is the Persian Gulf, not the Middle East, but the Persian Gulf, why is the Persian Gulf considered to be the third important strategic area? You can understand East Asia and you can understand Europe because that's where the great powers are. But why the Persian Gulf? And the answer, of course, is not because there's any great power in the Persian Gulf. There's not. It's because that's where the oil is. And we have long understood the centrality of oil, this natural resource, for fueling the international economy. And if something went catastrophically wrong with the flow of oil coming out of the Middle East, this would have disastrous consequences for the international economy. We've long understood this. And this is why we consider the Persian Gulf to be a vital strategic interest. All that tells you that if this war plays out in ways that you have a serious cutoff of the flow of oil out of the Gulf, or it's almost completely cut off, this will have disastrous consequences for the international economy. And it won't be just a case of not being able to get gas for your car at a reasonable price. That'll be the least of our problems. The fact is that if you cut off the flow of oil from the Gulf, the effects of that will ripple throughout the economy. It will have a tremendous effect on the industrial base as a whole. It will have a tremendous effect on the cost of electricity. Inflation will go through the roof. Production will be curtailed in serious ways. As I said, you could be in a global recession or a global depression, and people talk about that possibility all the time. And I want to be clear here. I'm not arguing, Chris, that this is going to happen. And in fact, I think that once it becomes clear that we're heading in that direction in a serious way, to put it in slightly different terms, once it becomes clear that we're heading for the edge of the cliff, I think the Trump administration will pull back. I think that President Trump and his lieutenants, who are not the world's greatest strategists, will understand clearly that we have to be very, very careful here because of what the consequences would be.
Let's talk about Russia and China. There have been reports, not surprising, that Russia is providing intelligence, maybe China too, to the Iranians, help with drone technology. This is, of course, what we have done against Russia in the war in Ukraine. Maybe you can just speculate a little bit on their role and the consequences for Russia and China.
Well, the first thing we should just talk about is the incentives that the Chinese and the Russians have to help Iran. And the fact is they have huge incentives, both of them, to help Iran and to do everything they can to make sure that the United States suffers a humiliating defeat in Iran. The United States is a mortal enemy of both Russia and China. And I believe that Putin and Xi Jinping fully understand this. I believe they don't say that publicly for diplomatic reasons. They're smart enough not to advertise just how dangerous they think the United States is, but they surely understand that they're dealing with a country that's basically a rogue elephant that can't be trusted and is incredibly powerful. So seeing the United States pinned down and in serious trouble in Iran is to both Russia and China's interest. Now, in terms of what the Russians and the Chinese are actually doing, there are limits to what they can do in terms of direct intervention. The last thing the Russians want to do, given that they're fighting this major war in Ukraine, is get bogged down in another war in Iran. So they're not going to get directly involved. And the Chinese don't have the power projection capability to do anything significantly to help Iran. They can't get involved directly either. But both the Russians and the Chinese are still helping Iran, and they're providing intelligence. By almost all accounts, the Russians are providing significant intelligence information to the Iranians that they're using for their advantage. It's quite clear that they've helped them with technology. There were all sorts of reports before the war started that the Chinese had sent in air defense missiles to Iran, and they had sent in a radar, a long-range radar that could track stealth aircraft. And that, coupled with the fact that the United States, that Russia is providing China with detailed intelligence information, has really helped the Iranians wage this war against Israel and the Gulf states and the United States military assets in the region. So they're helping for sure. And I think, very importantly, that as time goes by, Russian and Chinese assistance to Iran will grow. I think the problem that Israel faces in terms of destroying Iran as a functioning nation state will only increase with time, because I think the Chinese and the Russians will go to greater lengths in the future to help Iran than they have in the past. And as China in particular develops more power projection capability, and you want to remember China's building a blue water navy, and China's Belt and Road Initiative extends into the Middle East, I think you'll see the Chinese getting more and more involved in the politics of the Middle East and more involved in Iran, and they'll help Iran more than ever. And this will make it increasingly difficult for the United States and Israel to attack Iran, which in my humble opinion is certainly all for the good.
what is this going to do to the projection of U.S. power within the Middle East? These bases, as I pointed out in the introduction, were purportedly set up to protect countries like Qatar and Dubai. The opposite has happened. In fact, there are reports that most of the interceptors that the U.S. has are being shipped to Israel. How is that going to play out?
Well, I think you can tell two very different stories, Chris. First, you can tell the story that you were effectively telling, which is that we have turned these countries into giant magnets for Iranian ballistic missiles and drones because they're joined at the hip with us and because we have all these military installations sprinkled inside of these Gulf states. When a war breaks out with Iran, the Iranians have a powerful incentive to target these Gulf states. Again, they become magnets for Iranian ballistic missiles and drones. And given that story, you would think when the war ends that what the Gulf states will do is put a lot of distance between themselves and the United States and tell the Iranians if there's another conflict that they're staying out, they're not helping the United States, and they will not let the Americans use the bases on their territory, and maybe even they'll throw those bases out. That's one story you can tell. A different story, which points in exactly the opposite direction, is that when the war is over with, the Gulf states will move even closer to the United States and work closer with the United States to form a defensive shield against Iran, because this war will prove to the Gulf states just how dangerous Iran is. In the second story, Iran, not the United States, is the principal threat. In the first story, it's the United States, not Iran, that is the principal threat. I find it hard to say where the Gulf states will come down on this one when the war ends. But I do think there was evidence, even before the war started, that the Gulf states were moving away from the United States. I think if you look at the Saudis, they had serious doubts. This is before February 28th, whether the United States was a reliable ally. And as I'm sure you remember, the Saudis formed a strategic partnership with Pakistan. And Pakistan literally said it would put its nuclear umbrella over Saudi Arabia. And now the Turks are trying to help, or trying to join that Saudi-Pakistani alliance, make it triangular, because the Turks are worried about the Americans as well. The Turks and the Saudis see that the Americans and the Israelis are a tag team, and that the Israelis, at least, but even the Americans, are willing to use military force very liberally in the region. And who's to say they won't use it against the Gulf state? You remember that the Israelis actually attacked Qatar last year. That had a shocking effect on countries in the Gulf. The Israelis, right, who are joined at the hip with the Americans, attacked Qatar. What does that tell you? Are we safe? Are the Americans going to protect us? They didn't protect Qatar from an Israeli attack. So I think even before February 28th, these countries were getting skittish, and certainly after February 28th. Because you want to remember here, as we were talking about earlier in the show, if the Iranians really unleash the dogs and really go after the Gulf states, they go after the desalination plants, and they go after the oil infrastructure, and they try to destroy those sites completely, you're basically talking about destroying those countries. It's not clear that they can survive after that. The damage would be literally catastrophic. And what I'm saying is this is a real possibility. So you see what your close alliance with the United States has done for you. So you would think that this would at least to some degree push them away from reliance on the United States, because it seems to me that it is the United States, not Iran, that's the principal threat. But as I said, you could make the opposite argument.
Well, there must be a deep feeling of betrayal. They weren't consulted. They weren't part of the decision process, and they're paying a horrific price.
Absolutely. But as we know, the Trump administration doesn't really care what its allies think. The Trump administration does what it wants. President Trump is, not into he's not into taking the allies' interests into account. He's a unilateralist par excellence. He does whatever he wants. And I think, as I've said on numerous occasions, he treats allies worse than he treats adversaries.
So, John, let me just close by asking you about the effects on Israel. There's heavy military censorship. You're not allowed to film the aftermath of strikes. The interceptors apparently cannot do much against Iranian hypersonic missiles, which they have held in reserve. What do you see happening in Israel?
Well, as I said before, it's important to understand that in the initial week or so of this conflict, the Iranians have concentrated more on attacking the Gulf states and the American military assets in the Gulf states than they have focused on Israel. And they now have indicated that they're going to turn their attention to mainly attacking Israel. And it's very hard to determine what's been done so far to Israel, what sort of damage the Iranians have done to Israel, because of the censorship, as you described it. It's really quite remarkable how tight and effective the censorship has been. But I would imagine that quite a bit of damage has already been done, even though the Iranians have not been focusing on Israel per se. But with the passage of time, I believe more and more damage will be done. I believe the Iranians have the assets to attack Israel and to do great damage. And as you and I both know, Israel is a postage stamp-sized state. It's a small state, and the Iranians, with all those ballistic missiles and drones, can do a substantial amount of damage, especially if this war becomes a protracted conflict. So I think that Israel is going to suffer. And I think the fact that Israel is constantly at war against its neighbors, and you want to remember, the Israelis are now engaged with Hezbollah. They're not only fighting against Iran, they're fighting Hezbollah in a serious way as we speak. And of course, the genocide is ongoing in Gaza. So you have this multi-front war. There's no sign that it's ever going to end. As you and I both said, they're not going to destroy Iran. Iran is not going to disappear from the map. You're not, in all likelihood, going to get regime change. The person who's now in charge in Iran is more likely to pursue nuclear weapons than not. He's more inclined to pursue nuclear weapons, certainly, than his father was, who was the principal bloc against Iran getting nuclear weapons. So you can easily imagine a situation where Iran has nuclear weapons or is beginning to push down that road. And the question you have to ask yourself is, what effect is that going to have on Israeli society? If you're an Israeli citizen and you're constantly fighting these wars and you're running to bomb shelters when either Hezbollah or Iran is lobbing missiles and shooting drones at you, what does this say about your future life there? And then we begin to hypothesize a situation where maybe Iran has a nuclear weapon. You know Iran is a mortal enemy, and you've been telling yourself these stories for decades that Iran's principal goal is to eradicate you from the earth, and as soon as they get a nuclear weapon, they're going to attack you. I mean, isn't that going to incentivize you to leave the country? So I think Israel's future is very bleak here, and we haven't even begun to scratch the surface. Talk about the state of affairs in Israel, because there's all sorts of other cleavages in the society that don't bode well for the future. So I think Israel is a country that's in real trouble. And I think the idea that they can get themselves out of trouble by fighting more and more wars is a fallacious argument. I think war has a corrupting effect on societies. I think the Founding Fathers fully understood that when they created this country, and they wanted to create a situation where we went to war as infrequently as possible, and that was wise thinking. I say this as a realist, IR theory person, right? I understand that war is an instrument of statecraft, and that states sometimes go to war for good strategic reasons, but at the same time, I think you should go to enormous lengths to avoid going to war, unless you absolutely have to. But Israel has the opposite view. It lives by the sword. And I think if you live by the sword, you turn yourself into a modern version of Sparta. The end result is not going to be happy.
Well, we've done the same thing. I mean, we've eviscerated our diplomatic corps, militarized our embassies, I mean, and this is predates Trump.
Absolutely. I mean, I believe that if you are addicted to war and you become a crusader state, which is what we have become, you're going to undermine liberalism at home. And I think we're doing exactly that. I think it's a tragedy what's happening to liberal values in the United States. The extent to which people like President Trump trample on the Constitution, trample on the rule of law, ignore Congress. I mean, it's terrible what's happening here. And I think it's due in good part to all these wars that we fight, as well as our attachment to Israel. You want to remember that we are joined at the hip with this new Sparta. And when you're joined at the hip with Sparta, Sparta's values are going to percolate into your body politic. So one does not want to underestimate the negative impact that Israel and the Israel lobby has on liberal values inside of the United States.
Great, thanks, John. And I want to thank Diego, Sophia, Max, Victor, and Thomas, who produced the show. You can find me at chrishedges.substack.com.
Let's talk about Professor John Mearsheimer's recent remarks about, as we were just saying, who's really winning? What does winning look like? Crystal flagged this moment for us. A bunch of senators, by the way, went into a briefing.
Did both Nazi Germany.
The exact number, I know it's within that. Decides.
The other thing, declaration of war.
Sharing that.
Entire lie of
is backed to the hilt by the UAE. And the U.S. has been being pressured to put some pressure on the UAE as to...
That he owed his position to Donald Trump. You would think that he would tell Donald Trump what he wanted to hear about.
What is your greatest fear?
My greatest fear in all of this is that we will see a destruction of a country that holds a very ancient civilization that has made significant contributions to world heritage, that we will see a civil war that will destroy the country, destabilize the region, but also a war that in the end of it would make the United States a major loser. And Trump, incidentally, I have to say, one of the qualities that he does have is that he has the ability to make a 180. He has the ability to recognize that this is the wrong path and then just change. He did that with the Houthis. After 7 weeks of realizing that that was a mistake in war, he just ended it. Other presidents oftentimes don't have the guts to do so. Instead, they kick the can down the road and hope that the next president will deal with that debacle. Trump can put an end to it. And I really hope that he does so for the sake of the United States, but also for the sake of Iran and the region as a whole.
No taxes, nice weather, good.
The Queen. Hey.
Really?
Yeah. So she's paying you the 120.
Okay.
Okay.
But then I wanted a $20 tip, so it's
But that's okay.
All right, yeah, I guess that's okay. All right, so you want me to walk back to your car or anything?
No, it's okay. No, actually, I need to get my Stetson. I need to get my Stetson, actually.
You want to change numbers? This is random.
Actually, Kate has your number.
Okay.
So, actually, basically, yeah.
All right.
Okay, bye. Yeah, see ya.
Dude, so true. So true. Dismissal.
He calls himself top.
Bank sent $20.
Big Fury!
Where the majority of the country.
Threat is a threat. And it's hard to
People on your Telegram, right?
Yeah.
And you're advertising only fans goals on there.
Yeah.
Isn't that the same reason that people that push it, they don't care, they don't money? We do a lot worse. Then we take them out, By this afternoon, it's back within an hour.
I think you have to find an intermediary. Someone who's not part of the problem. My personal